At 37,000 feet over the freezing emptiness of the North Atlantic, the cockpit window exploded, and in less than 2 seconds, the captain vanished into the night. The autopilot disconnected. Warning sirens screamed. The first officer was alone. And behind him, a flight attendant ran through the cabin shouting words no passenger ever expects to hear. Can anyone fly? What happened in the next 8 minutes would become one of the strangest survival stories in aviation history. Because among the terrified passengers, one man slowly raised his hand. And what he said changed everything. I used to fly 20 years ago. But was that enough? It was the evening of October 14th, 2029. Flight Atlantic Crown 271, operated by British Airways, was a scheduled transatlantic route from London to New York City. Aircraft, Boeing 787 Dreamliner. Departure, Heathrow Airport. Destination, John F. Kennedy International Airport. Souls onboard, 242 passengers. 10 cabin crew. 2 pilots. Captain James Holloway, age 54. A veteran with 18,000 flight hours. First officer, Ethan Cole, age 29. Sharp, calm, but relatively inexperienced. Weather: cold. Heavy jet stream. Moderate turbulence forecast over the Atlantic. But nothing unusual. Inside the cabin, life felt normal. Passengers watched movies. Children slept. Flight attendants served coffee. In seat 18A, an older man named Daniel Mercer quietly stared at the clouds. Nobody knew Daniel had once been an Air Force pilot. And nobody knew he would soon become the only chance of survival. Because 41 minutes after takeoff, everything changed. 3 main story. Scene 1, the perfect departure. Narration: the Dreamliner pushed back smoothly. Rain tapped against the fuselage. Taxi lights glowed across wet pavement. Inside the cockpit, Captain Holloway and Ethan reviewed their departure checklist. Everything looked perfect. Pilot dialogue. Captain Holloway: flight controls. Ethan: checked. Captain: fuel. Ethan: 74.6. ATC dialogue. Tower: Atlantic Crown 271, cleared for takeoff. Captain: cleared for takeoff. Passenger reactions. Seat belts clicked. Engines roared. People smiled. Vacation had begun. Technical explanation: all aircraft systems were normal. No warnings. No anomalies. Suspense ending. But at 14,000 feet, a tiny crack appeared in the left cockpit windshield. And nobody noticed. Scene 2, climbing into darkness. Narration: the aircraft climbed through storm layers. Lightning flashed outside. The crack spread slowly, almost invisibly. Cabin pressure remained stable. But structural stress was building. Pilot dialogue. Captain: turbulence picking up. Ethan: nothing major. Passenger reactions. Some passengers gripped armrests. A baby started crying. Technical explanation: temperature differences between inside and outside can weaken compromised glass. At high altitude, that crack became dangerous. Suspense ending. At 31,000 feet, the captain heard a strange whistle. Scene 3, the sound. Narration: a thin, sharp hiss. Air escaping. Captain Holloway leaned toward the window. Too close. Too fast. Pilot dialogue. Captain: you hear that? Ethan: yeah, left side. Technical explanation. A windshield seal had failed. Pressure was escaping, and the outer layer was seconds from catastrophic rupture. Suspense ending. Then, boom. Scene 4, Captain gone. Narration. The windshield exploded. Explosive decompression tore through the cockpit. Captain Holloway was sucked halfway out. His harness snapped. In one violent instant, he disappeared. Gone. The cockpit became a hurricane. Papers, glass, blood. Everything spinning. Pilot dialogue. Ethan. Mayday, Mayday. ATC dialogue. ATC. Atlantic Crown 271, say again. Passenger reactions. Masks dropped. People screamed. The cabin shook violently. Technical explanation. Rapid decompression causes oxygen loss and violent airflow. At 37,000 feet, consciousness can be lost in seconds. Suspense ending. But Ethan's oxygen mask was damaged, and he had less than 20 seconds. Scene 5, alone. Narration. Ethan forced the aircraft into emergency descent. Hands shaking. Vision blurring. He fought to breathe. The captain was gone. The left side controls damaged. And now, the autopilot failed. Pilot dialogue. Ethan, come on, stay with me. Technical explanation. Debris had severed autopilot sensors. Manual control only. Suspense ending. Then Ethan collapsed. The aircraft was now pilotless. Scene 6, cabin chaos. Narration. Flight attendant Maria Santos opened the cockpit. What she saw froze her blood. No captain. First officer unconscious. Controls shaking. Altitude dropping fast. Passenger reactions. Screaming. Praying. Panic spreading. Dialogue. Maria. Can anyone fly? Silence. Then, a voice. Daniel Mercer. I can try. Suspense ending. But Daniel hadn't touched a cockpit in 20 years. Scene 7, the volunteer. Narration. Daniel entered. Blood on the controls. Wind roaring. Alarm screaming. He recognized enough. But this aircraft was nothing like the jets he once flew. Technical explanation. Flying older military aircraft is vastly different from modern airliners. Systems are digital. Automation heavy. Dialogue. Daniel. How do I talk to ATC? Suspense ending. And the plane was dropping below 18,000 feet. Vast. Scene 8, ground control. ATC dialogue. ATC Shannon. Atlantic Crown 271, identify. Daniel. This is passenger Daniel Mercer, both pilots down. Silence. Then, ATC. Sir, can you fly? Daniel. A little. Suspense ending. A little wasn't enough. Scene 9, racing the ocean. Daniel leveled the aircraft. Barely. Fuel imbalance warning. Hydraulic fault. Windshield gone. Freezing air flooding cockpit. Passenger reactions. People were vomiting. Crying. Holding each other. Technical explanation. The aircraft needed immediate diversion. Nearest runway, Shannon Airport. But it was 8 minutes away. Suspense ending. Then the right engine surged. Scene 10, fire warning. Engine fire alert. Could be false. Could be fatal. Daniel hesitated. ATC dialogue. Shut it down now. Technical explanation. An engine shutdown at low altitude means asymmetrical thrust. Harder to control. Suspense ending. Daniel pulled the lever, and the aircraft rolled violently left. Scene 11, the dead stick fight. Single engine. Heavy rain. No captain. Unconscious first officer. Daniel fought the controls. Muscle against machine. Pilot dialogue. Daniel. Come on. Suspense ending. Runway lights appeared, then vanished in fog. Scene 12, one chance. Shannon cleared the runway. Emergency crews lined both sides. Fuel low. Altitude unstable. Too fast. Too high. ATC. Go around not recommended. Technical explanation. At this point, there was no fuel for a second approach. This landing had to work. Suspense ending. Landing gear wouldn't extend. Scene 13, manual release. Maria found the emergency gear handle. Pulled. Nothing. Pulled again. Clunk. Green lights. Gear down. Maybe. Suspense ending. Maybe wasn't enough. Scene 14, final approach. Rain slammed the windshield opening. Daniel could barely see. He followed only runway lights. Speed 182 knots. Too fast. ATC. Reduce speed. Suspense ending. The left wing dipped dangerously low. Scene 15, impact. The aircraft slammed down. Hard. Left gear collapsed. Sparks erupted. The plane skidded. Fire trailed behind. Passengers braced for death. Passenger reactions. Screaming. Crying. Silence. Suspense ending. Then the plane stopped. And nobody moved. Scene 16, evacuation. Evacuate. Slides deployed. Smoke-filled cabin. People jumped into rain. Fire crews attacked flames. Suspense ending. But 3 passengers were missing. Scene 17, the search. Rescuers entered the burning cabin. Found all 3 trapped. Alive. Pulled out seconds before fire spread. Suspense ending. But what about the captain? Scene 18, black box. Investigators recovered cockpit voice. They heard the whistle, the warning, the explosion. Then Ethan's last words. Captain. Technical explanation. Investigators confirmed a microscopic windshield defect caused catastrophic failure. Suspense ending. But there was one final mystery. Scene 19, the truth about Daniel. Daniel Mercer wasn't just a little trained. He was a decorated former combat pilot. Retired 22 years. He lied because he feared freezing under pressure. But he saved 251 lives. Suspense ending. And Ethan. He woke up. With no memory. Scene 20, the hospital wake-up. 3 hours after the emergency landing at Shannon, First Officer Ethan Cole opened his eyes in intensive care. Machines beeped. His hands trembled. His lungs burned from decompression trauma. The first thing he asked was, "Did we make it?" A nurse nodded. But when Ethan asked for Captain Holloway, the room went silent. He already knew the answer. For Ethan, survival came with a cost. He was the last man to see the captain alive. And now investigators needed every memory he had. But Ethan could barely remember the explosion. Only one thing kept replaying in his mind. That whistle. That tiny sound. The sound that warned them. And the sound they ignored. But the black box would reveal something even darker. Scene 21. The investigation begins. 48 hours later, investigators from the Air Accidents Investigation Branch arrived. The aircraft sat on the wet runway. Burned. Broken. Its left cockpit side torn open like a wound. Investigators studied every inch. The shattered windshield frame. The blood on the controls. The torn harness clips. Then they found something unusual. A maintenance report. 3 weeks earlier, a technician had written, "Minor stress marks on left windshield seal. No replacement ordered. No follow-up inspection." That note changed everything. Because what looked minor on the ground became fatal in the sky. And now blame was spreading fast. Scene 22. Daniel's secret. Reporters flooded Shannon. Everyone wanted to meet Daniel Mercer. The hero. The man who landed a Dreamliner. But Daniel refused interviews. He stayed alone. Quiet. Shaking. Because the truth was heavier than anyone knew. Daniel had not flown for 22 years. And the last time he flew, his wingman died beside him in combat. Since then, he never touched controls again. That night in seat 18A, when Maria asked for help, Daniel almost stayed silent. Almost. But then he heard children crying. And something inside him woke up. Not courage. Instinct. And that instinct saved everyone. But Daniel blamed himself for one thing. He believed Captain Holloway might still be alive. If he had acted faster. Scene 23. The black box playback. Inside a secure lab in London, investigators replayed the cockpit voice recorder. Minute by minute. Second by second. Then they heard it. The whistle. 8 full seconds before impact. 8 seconds. Enough time to react. Enough time to descend. Enough time to move away. But they didn't. Then came the explosion. Metal tearing. Glass shattering. The captain screaming. And then, silence. The report concluded. If the captain had remained seated farther back, he might have survived. That truth crushed Ethan. Because he had seen the captain lean forward. He had watched it happen. And now he had to live with it forever. Scene 24. The final discovery. Weeks later, deep in the Atlantic, search teams found part of Captain Holloway's flight harness. Still attached to torn cockpit metal. Proof he fought until the very end. But there was something else. The harness lock had failed. A manufacturing defect. Tiny. Almost invisible. But deadly. That meant the captain wasn't supposed to be pulled out. The harness should have held. This changed the case completely. Now it wasn't just maintenance. It was design failure. A chain of tiny mistakes. Each harmless alone. Deadly together. Final ending. Atlantic Crown 271 became one of aviation's most studied emergencies. 251 people survived. 1 captain was lost. 1 first officer carried the trauma. And 1 passenger became a legend. Daniel Mercer never flew again. When asked why he stepped forward, he gave only one answer. Because someone had to. Ethan returned to flying 2 years later. But every time he hears wind against glass, he remembers that night. The lesson. In aviation, disasters are rarely caused by one thing. They are built, piece by piece, warning by warning, until one final moment breaks everything. And sometimes, survival doesn't come from training, or rank, or experience. Sometimes, it comes from the one person nobody expected. at 37,000 feet, with 8 seconds left, and the courage to say, "I'll try." 6 months after the accident, the final report was released. The cause was clear: a weakened cockpit windshield seal, a defective harness lock, and 8 seconds of warning that no one realized would be their last. Captain James Holloway was officially declared lost over the Atlantic. His family received his wings, folded into a wooden frame. A hero until the very end. First Officer Ethan Cole returned home carrying scars no one could see. For months, he replayed that moment in his mind. The whistle, the crack, the explosion, the captain disappearing into darkness. He would later tell investigators, "I thought we were all dead." But against every law of probability, they lived. All 251 souls survived. Because in the middle of chaos, when alarms screamed when the aircraft fell, and when fear took over, one man stood up. Daniel Mercer. A passenger, a stranger, a forgotten pilot. He never called himself a hero. He refused interviews, refused fame, and went back to his quiet life. But every passenger on board knew the truth. Without him, they would never have seen the ground again. Today, Flight 271 is remembered not as a tragedy, but as proof of something extraordinary. That sometimes, in the worst possible moment, the right person is already there, waiting. And when the world asks, "Can anyone fly?" sometimes, someone answers, and that answer changes everything. Fade to black. Engine noise fades. Silence.